Welcome to solverfy.
Okay, so this question is wanting us to talk about which of the things in this list are physical properties or changes. And the context here matters. What they're really talking about is physical properties or changes and not chemical properties or changes. Okay, so when it comes to physical properties, definitionally, this is things that you can observe directly, right? You can touch something, you can watch it happen with your eyes, right? Observe directly without needing to cause any chemical reactions to happen, right? You can see what the change is, or hear it, or, well, as we're going to get into, smell it, right? And what's funny is that one of the things in this list, characteristics that can be directly observed, if I number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, five just is the definition of a physical property, right? It's something that can be observed directly. Great. Okay. And then the other thing is physical changes. Okay. So physical changes are, again, they've given us the definition in the problem: characteristics that a substance displays without changing its composition, right? So that means, let's say I have a gold bar, and a gold bar is made out of pure gold. It's just a bunch of gold atoms. And if I heat it over fire, let's say, I don't know, 1000 degrees Celsius, right? And I get a puddle of gold. It's still just a bunch of gold atoms. Yeah, they're in liquid form now, but they're no longer, but they're still gold, right? The composition hasn't changed. So physical changes are given in number 2, definitionally, changes where the composition hasn't changed. Okay. So now that we actually have been given these definitions, we can start going through and say, well, the smell of roses. Well, is smell something you can observe directly? Yeah, you can walk up to something and smell it, right? Nothing about it changed when you smelled it. Or, it's a ever-present characteristic or property of roses that they have a certain smell. And the same is true of something like melting point, right? Melting point, if you heat something, you can see what temperature it melts at. You can observe that directly. You don't have to change the composition of gold in order to observe its melting point. It's a property, right, of pure gold that it melts at some point. So melting points, that's a physical property, okay? Then we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't know why I circled 4, but that was a mistake. 4 is liquid water is heavier than frozen water, right? So the fact that liquid water is heavier than frozen water, is that a physical property or a chemical property? I would say this is somewhat vague. Perhaps I'm going to say this is not the case, and it's simply that the mass of water or the weight of water and frozen water are exactly the same, right? And they are both so-called extensive properties, meaning the more water you have, the more it weighs, right? You could compare the density of water and ice, right? And those are different, and those would be physical properties. But the mass of something depends on how much of it you have, right? So it's not a physical property, it's what's called an extensive property, which depends on the extent of it or how much of it you have. Okay. Finally, we have, number 5, I guess not finally, was the characteristics that could be directly observed. That was just the definition of a physical property. And then number 6 is the burning of wood, right? And if you weren't aware, the burning of wood is a chemical process, right? We really have wood is made up of these kind of like strings of molecules that are kind of stitched together, mostly carbon. And when you heat them in the presence of oxygen, they get broken up into these smaller molecules, and those get broken up into CO2 and water. Right, so burning ultimately is a chemical change. Right, the thing you get after you burn something is not what you started with compositionally. You've incorporated a bunch of oxygen. You've changed the way it's held together. So yeah, 1, 2, 3, and 5 are all fine. 4 and 6 are not. Do not apply to physical properties or changes.